Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna mess around with using this thing in full screen. I haven't done that before. Really?
It's change. Change. Oh, question.
Shut up.
No. What did you when like working with the MD5 stuff when you had to import the library, the crypto library?
Yeah.
Did you have to do anything else? Like tweak it?
To tweak it?
Because I was getting an error.
No, just this.
But you have to like import it through the other thing though, right?
No,
Really? You don't have to like load the library?
I don't think so.
Because I oh alright.
No.
I didn't have to. I uploaded the lib common crypto.
Maybe you don't need that. I mean, it comes with it. Make sure, are you using the angle brackets and not...
Yeah.
Is this text big enough?
No. Yeah, it's pretty small.
Okay. This is the first time I'm using this laptop for this class. Text, editing. Ooh, line numbers, like line numbers. Fonts, colors. I think I just go presentation mode. Ugh, that's too big. Did we? Are you lying?
No, it's running. You look now.
Duplicate default. Yeah, we'll call this guy class. And class will have a 14. Is that big enough? Or a little bigger?
A little bigger. Like,
Still bigger? At least 18? Just look over here. That's not big enough?
I mean, it is, but...
No, I mean, it's just here. I can't see it from your angle, so it needs to be a little bigger still. It would be beneficial.
I mean, I could see it like this.
How about that?
You should always ask for Joey.
We're legit?
I like that.
All right, we're legit. Perfect.
Hey, bueno.
Okay. So now I'm interested what happens when I run this. Oh, it just launches the simulator in another window.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go ahead and log in. What was the password? Blah. Okay, so that takes us here. Gives us our welcome. Shouldn't this thing well, whatever, it's fine. So tells us who we are. Now remember when we built this, when we built our main VC, we changed the constructor to now take in a name and a user ID. Okay, now what I would probably do is I'm going to have this guy take in a let's do it this way. Just to build out our data a little bit. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to go to our dashboard. I'll go to the data browser for Puppet PM. And we're going to now store our roles inside of our database. Is this a little small? We're good? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to drop this role object for right now. We were already storing it inside here, but then we went and did some authentication. Now we want to marry the two together. We want to store our roles associated with an individual user. Does that make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to drop our role object. So we'll drop class. And then we'll add a new class. So we're going to add a class role object. Just build a brand new one. Okay. Okay, here's our role object. Now, notice that we have something in here called an object ID, which is our unique identifier. So that gets created for us. Oh, and by the way, if you ever have a weird bug in your code and you're trying to use an object ID, make sure you use a capital I for ID, or you will spend 25 minutes debugging something stupid like that. FYI. So, in any case, every object, every class that we have in here, no matter what one it is, gets its own column called object ID. So what we want to do is we want to add a user ID to this, to our role object. And we want that user ID to be matching whatever the object ID is for one of our users. Does that make sense? That way we can uniquely identify the user roles based on their unique ID, where before we were doing it based on a device. Okay, so I'm going to go in the role object. We're going to add some columns. So we're going to add a UID. This is going to be a string. And then we need to add a role name and a role description, right? So we'll say role underscore name of type string and role underscore description of type string. That's interesting. Okay, so a role will have associated with it a unique object ID, which will get created every single time we create a role, a user ID, which we're going to put in for the current user who's logged in, the name of the role, and the description. Okay, so we're going to leave this for right now because we're not going to put any data in here yet. So in order to make this work, what we're going to do, I don't think I'm using these my objects, am I? Let me just delete it and see who screams. Move to trash. Perfect. We're good. We weren't using it. All right, so I'm going to create a new file, Objective-C class. This guy's going to be an NS object. And we're going to call this guy an authenticated user object. Okay? So, just a class and object that we can build and we can pass around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here and I just want to look at my authenticated thing. We have a username, we have a password, we have a name. Okay, so really the only piece of information we need to know about this guy is his name and his object ID, right? We'll go ahead and keep his username just for the heck of it. So we're inside of authenticated user dot h. We're going to keep track of 3 pieces of information: an NS string pointer user ID, an NS string pointer name, and an NS string pointer username, in case we find that helpful. We don't need to store their password. Make sense? We can if we want, but I would say a general rule of thumb is unless there's a great reason to store a password, don't store a password. Just never, it rarely makes sense. Now, we're going to initialize this guy, init with pf object. In order to make that work, I need to import the parse.h. So pf object pointer pfo. So that's our constructor. Now we'll go and implement that in the .m file. When we build our self is equal to super init, return self at the bottom. Okay, now we need to go ahead and set our various variables. Now, as a reminder, I'm going to go into login, and inside of viewDidLoad, actually we can use this right here. Just steal that code real quick. Okay, so we're going to set name equal to PFO value for key name because the key there is we are inside of authenticate is name. Then we're going to want to get their username for the key username. And then finally, we're going to get the UID. And this is object ID, capital I. Capital I. All right. So we will build an authenticated user with the PF object that we got that represents the code we got back from the cloud. And we're going to do it right here in login. So in login.m, the very top here, I'm going to import my authenticated user.h, that dude. Okay, then I'm going to get rid of this choice 2 stuff too, just so it's not cluttering up our screen. So this is where we have, we are authenticated if we are in that else. So what I want to do is I want to build a brand new authenticated user. So I'm going to create an authenticated user pointer, AU, and this is going to be an authenticated user alloc init with PF object, and the PF object I want to initialize it with is whatever's returned from query get first object. I could also just say the user. So here, maybe that will look cleaner to us. So grab the PF object, then build our authenticated user with that object. Make sense? Okay. Now, just to prove real quick that that's working, let's go ahead and let's give our authenticated user the ability to display itself real quick. Just a quick instance method. And we'll say nslog. We'll say %@ for their name, \n as carriage return. Then we'll say %@ for their username, \n for carriage return, then %@ for their user ID. Good enough. Name, username, UID to fill in those 3 placeholders. All right. So then to test that after we log in, when we create our authenticated user, we'll quickly ask him to display himself. And hopefully we get the nice formatted output. So go ahead and run this. There's our Mike Littman, awesome fat, user ID down here. I don't know if there's a way to make that bigger, so just deal with it. Okay, so that guy seems to work. So now what we want to do is we want to change our main VC to no longer take in a user ID and a name. Now we want it to take in an authenticated user. So remember main VC last time, we updated so it would take in the name and the user ID. Now we're going to have it just take in a authenticated user object. And we'll import authenticated user, and we'll give ourselves, we'll get rid of this username and user ID strings there, and instead we'll give ourselves an authenticated user pointer, maybe called the user. And we'll go ahead and build our constructor, well, rebuild our constructor, I suppose. So here's the current constructor. We'll just overwrite that. And now we're going to set the user is equal to AU. Okay? But then the last thing we need to do is our welcome label, we have currently saying welcome followed by the person's name. Well, the person's name is no longer stored inside of a variable named name. It's now stored inside of our object called the user, which is an authenticated user. So we need to go ahead and give ourselves an accessor method so we can access their name. So I'll go into authenticated user. I'll create a method that returns an NS string called getName. It takes no parameters. And we'll go and write that real quick. Have it return the name. Go back to main VC. And now instead of saying name here, we're going to say the user get name. Okay. Now we go back to our login VC where we're currently creating our brand new main VC, but it's not init with name anymore. Now it's init with authenticated user. Our authenticated user here is called AU. So we're building it, passing it a different type of input. Instead of 2 strings, we're passing it a single object. Hey. Shut up, Simon. Try to be nice just once. I know it's not sincere. All right, so now this thing should compile. We'll go ahead and run it. We'll see we have the exact same behavior we had before. Welcome back, Libby. Just our means to an end was a little bit different. That makes sense? Now, we want to click on Manage, but when we go to Manage VC, we need to pass around our authenticated user. Every one of these screens needs to be aware of the current authenticated user because we are going to need that information in order to do different things. Make sense? So for my Manage VC, I need to pass it the authenticated user. So we need to go into Hello. So we're going to have this guy. We need to import authenticated user. And we'll create an authenticated user pointer called the user. And because we're probably going to keep this pretty pretty generic, well, screw it. I'll just write it again. ID init with authenticated user pointer AU. So I'll write a constructor for this. You'll notice it's literally identical to the constructor that we wrote for the other guys. I'm debating whether I want to show you kind of a neat computer science-y. Okay, I'm going to show you something cool. What's up? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a new class in here, new file, and this guy is going to be an Objective-C class. He's going to be a UI view controller. And we're going to call him a Puppet PM VC. Just a Puppet PM view controller. All right. And I am actually not going to create a zib for him because I don't need one. So he's going to be a UI view controller. His name's going to be Puppet PM VC. All right, so here's this guy. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into our Manage VC here. I'm going to steal this line. And I'm actually going to delete this line. I'm going to delete that line. We're going to clean this stuff up a little bit. So this guy's back to what he was before. He doesn't have any of that crap. Okay? I'm going to come into Puppet PM VC. We're going to import authenticated user.h. This is in the .h file. We're going to have this guy take in an authenticated user called the user, and we're going to implement a constructor called init with authenticated user. Then I'm trying to think, did I really save myself that much here? Yeah, we will end up saving ourselves some stuff here. I'm actually not going to write that constructor that way. I'm going to keep the class, still have the authenticated users sitting here, and I'm going to write a method called set authenticated user to be on authenticated user pointer AU. And I'll go implement this. So I'll get rid of that. And we'll say the user is equal to AU. And then I'm also going to write a get authenticated user, so we have a way of extracting it. Actually, we don't even need that. We'll have access to it. It'll be fine. Just like this. So this guy, his name is Puppet PMVC. He is a UI view controller. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to start with login VC. Login VC is a Puppet PMVC. So he's no longer going to inherit from UI view controller. He's going to inherit from Puppet PMVC. Okay? So now watch what happens here. Oh, actually, hold on. Not login. Login's going to stay a normal view controller. We want main VC to be the first one. So undo whatever you did to login. Go back to main VC is our starting one here. This guy is going to import Puppet PMVC, and he's not going to inherit from UI view controller. Instead, he's going to inherit from Puppet PMVC. He is a Puppet PMVC, which is a UI view controller. So what we did is we inserted some extra stuff in here. So now our main VC has a variable called authenticated user, the user, and also has a function to set that user. And the way we can use this, let me go back into login.m now. Actually, main VC, I'm going to take out our constructor for main VC. We don't need that guy anymore. I'm going to unimplement that constructor as well. We don't need him anymore. We can just utilize our parent's constructor. And now what we need to do is inside of login vc.m, right here where we're creating our new main VC, I'm going to say main VC pointer MVC is equal to this guy, except now it's just init. So back to the simple way of creating a main VC. But then I'll say MVC set authenticated user to AU. And then I'll pass in MVC. That make sense? So I created a plain Jane looking main VC right here. Didn't pass anything into the constructor. But it just so happens that main VC is a little bit more than meets the eye. He is not a normal view controller. He's actually a Puppet PM view controller. And what's a Puppet PM view controller? A Puppet PM view controller is everything that a UI view controller is, plus an authenticated user with a method called set authenticated user. Does that make sense? So kind of a neat way for us to expand that a little bit. There's actually a built-in way to do this even more directly, where we can actually extend UI view controller to have this extra 2 pieces of information. It's through something called a category. I'm not going to go into it, but it exists in Objective-C. So in that case, we would actually say UI view controllers are actually more than they used to be, but it's still a UI view controller. But I kind of like this. This is a little bit more transparent. So we're going to have all of our things after login VC actually be Puppet PM VCs, which adds this one additional layer. So they'll all have our authenticated user in them. So we did that in the login. So when we created our main VC, we created it, set its authenticated user, then pushed it onto the stack. If we are in main VC, notice it's yelling about this right here in main VC because I already got this guy. He came with Puppet PM VC. I don't need to redefine him. So I'll delete that from there. Okay, so now when manage button is pressed, what are we going to do? We are going to build a manage VC pointer, MVC, is equal to manage VC alloc init. A simple one. Now let me jump into manage VC real quick. Here's our manage VC. This guy is not going to be a UI view controller. He's actually a Puppet PM view controller, which is a UI view controller. So now inside of main VC, when we click that button, we can now say MVC set authenticated user to the user. And notice that in main VC, we do not have a variable defined called the user. Why? It came with my parent. It came from my parent, Puppet PM VC. So he's there, I just don't see him. So it keeps us from having to implement this for every single one of our classes. And then what ends up happening is if we add an ability that we want all Puppet PM VCs to have, we only have to add it in one place. We just update Puppet PM VC, and all of these classes that are Puppet PM VCs will automatically get that ability. So it's kind of an object-oriented approach here where we're saying we want all these guys to be normal view controllers, but every single one of them needs to also have this authenticated user aspect, as far as we know right now. Later on, they might need some more crap, but they all need to have this authenticated user aspect. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually put all the authenticated user stuff inside of a single class called Puppet PM VC, and then make all those guys inherit from it. So manage VC.m. Yeah. This guy takes in a Puppet like that, and then he inherits from it. All right. Otherwise, he works the same as he worked before, except now I'm actually going to take away the init with nib name. We don't need that. That we didn't write it. It came with the default stuff. Okay, so the screen that we were just messing with there is this screen right here, Manage VC. And right now we don't do anything on this screen except push manage roles. So when we press this button, all these other buttons are dead right now. I mean, they look like nice, pretty buttons, and we can click them, and they're clickable, but they don't go anywhere. So only manage roles actually takes us anywhere. So to kind of finish this this process, we'll go to manage roles vc.h. This guy is not a UI view controller. He is a Puppet PM view controller. Okay. And as a Puppet PM view controller, when we create them, so we'll go back to manage vc.m, and here is our manage roles button pressed. We're going to take this guy right here, and we're going to build him before we push it on the navigation. So we're going to say manage roles vc pointer mrvc is equal to that. Then we'll say mrvc set authenticated user to the user. And then the view controller will push is mrvc. So we do need to remember that before we push these guys onto the stack, that we always set this this authenticated user. We have to remember that. Okay? But what we've done is we've centralized the logic for anything that is a Puppet PM VC so that later on, if we do add something to that, add another object, add a array of roles, for example, we only have to add it in one place, and they all become aware of it. Okay. So now we have our everything up through our manage roles VC. So as of right now, everything that exists. None of the other view controllers actually go anywhere, or none of the other buttons go anywhere. So now let's go back to manage roles VC and see how this guy currently works. Because we used to have this stuff stored in parse, correct? But now we're changing it because we want it to work on our current guy. So in the init, what are we doing? Well, the init is when we are actually checking to see what roles exist. Why can't we do that now? So this is manage roles VC. When I first create this guy, I'm trying to check the cloud to see if there's already some roles stored, correct? But now when we do this, we're going to have our roles stored associated with whoever the user ID is. Why can't I do this inside of my constructor now? Why will this code no longer make sense? Forget about device ID. So here, I'll even change this. What do I call it? I call it UID. Yeah, UID. Where UID matches the user get. I'm going to call it UID there. We need to go write that real quick. So let me go to authenticated user. We'll add another little method in here, and a string pointer get UID. And this guy is just going to return the UID. So I'll implement that real quick. Okay. Go back to manage roles.m. So now this is a legal line. If this is the constructor for manage roles VC, why can I not do that code here? This can be like a comic flip book. How did we get here? Let's go back to manage VC right here. We got there using those three lines. A init gets called right here. That's a constructor, right? When we're inside of a init, here's manage roles VC. Here's a init right here. When we're inside of a init, we're trying to get the user ID associated with the current user, right? I call a init right there. What haven't we done yet? We don't have a user yet. Because of the way we've written this now, because we no longer can pass it into the constructor, we have to do it kind of after the fact. No. Great idea, Simon. I'm going to get rid of that method. We're going to make this better. We're going to have the guys inherit the constructor. So we're going to have this guy have an ID, init with authenticated user pointer AU. So this is inside Puppet PMVC. Implement it in the .m. Get rid of that function. Here's our constructor. Self is equal to super init. Return self. And in the middle, set the user equal to AU. Now, anything that is an instance of Puppet PMVC will have a constructor called init with authenticated user. They get that constructor. So let me draw a picture here. This is kind of an important. So Puppet PMVC. Init with authenticated user. This constructor is associated with all Puppet PMVCs. Make sense? Now, all Puppet PMVCs are UI view controllers. So every one of these guys has a parent that is a UI view controller. So a Puppet PMVC is everything that a UI view controller is, with just a little bit more. That make sense? So then, when we write our main VC, manage role, or here, manage VC, and manage roles VC, when we write all those, and we make each one of those guys a Puppet PMVC, main VC is a Puppet PMVC, which is a UI view controller. But the benefit it got from being a Puppet PMVC is it gets a constructor called init with authenticated user. Manage VC is a Puppet PMVC, which is a UI view controller. The advantage he gets is he gets a constructor called init with authenticated user. So on and so forth. Does that make sense? How this hierarchy works? We want all these guys to be view controllers. We want them to be view controllers. So that's why they each have a grandparent that is a UI view controller. But we've inserted in here a parent, somebody in the middle, that adds just a little bit of useful stuff to the mix. So now what we can do is in login.m, I don't have to do this as 3 lines. I can say this guy init with main VC alloc push view controller main VC alloc init with authenticated user AU. So I can call that constructor. I'll steal this line. Similarly, in main VC, when we click Manage button, we don't need this line. Now we say Manage VC, alloc, init with authenticated user, the user. Similarly, when we call Manage Roles VC from within Manage Roles button pressed, we don't need all this. We create a Manage Roles VC alloc init with authenticated user. Make sense? So every single time I build a main VC, I can call the init with authenticated user constructor that he inherited from his parent. Every single time I create an instance of manage VC, I can call the init with authenticated user constructor that he inherited from his parent. Every single time I call manage roles VC, I can call the init with authenticated user constructor that he inherited from his parent. That make sense? So now, no matter which of these Puppet PM VCs I create, I can create them using the exact same constructor that I wrote one time. It's a constructor that takes in an authenticated user and displays it, and sets it. Okay? So, lastly, in manage roles, I no longer need this init method. But I'm going to want to steal some of this code because I'm going to need this here in a few minutes. I don't have a init because I'm not going to call upon that constructor. Because when I create a manage roles VC, what am I going to call? I'm going to call my parent's constructor the init with authenticated user. If I can't do that cloud lookup inside the constructor, where is the next best place to do it? ViewDidLoad. ViewDidLoad is my first opportunity to do something after a object has been created, but before a view controller appears on the screen. Does that make sense? So I'll need to come down here to viewDidLoad, and I'll need to add the appropriate code in here. That make sense? Now this code's not quite done yet because we need to have it match up with what's in the cloud, but we're pretty close. And last thing here is we'll just take out the init. So I think everybody should be happy right now. Build succeeded. So what we'll do next time when we come back, we'll quickly finish this up. That is, we will make sure we read in from the cloud all the roles for the current user who's logged in. We'll make sure we update add new role so that it updates the cloud for the correct user. And then we'll see that we can log in and out with different user accounts. And based on which user account we logged in with, it shows us the appropriate roles. All right, and then we will also talk about the final exam. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? I'll see everybody on Friday.